everyone. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to see some familiar faces too. Hey, Catherine. So this is informal, where if a catch suddenly lands on the middle of my Zoom, please understand. And I'm sure all of you are well used to these unusual Zoom times. So we'll be using the chat function. So if you can locate that, if you haven't utilized that before, particularly in Q&A, we'll use that. It's lovely to see everybody here. We're also going to use the reactions button, which is the smiley face with the plus sign beside it. We're not going to do raising hands, but if there's something the speakers have said that resonates with you, feel free to do it, use a thumbs up or a heart or some sort of emoji just to have a little bit of interaction with them as they are presenting. And before we get started, I'm going to take you to Mentimeter, because we just want to check and see who's in the room and where everybody's at, and kind of just at least get some human communication and connection happening. So as per the instructions in the chat, if you could grab your phone and go to www.menti.com and type in the code that's there. I'm just going to share screen now so that you can see what should come up on your phone. Oh. So our morning check-ins, for those of you who haven't done it yet. So if you can choose a picture that resonates with how you're feeling, how you're doing this morning. I can see that a lot of us are looking for another coffee. I'll just give you another minute for those of you who are joining just to go to the menti.com website and pop the code in. Okay, and I'm just going to go to the next one. This is going to help us as speakers to just have a bit of an idea of where people are at in terms of research and social enterprise and experience around it. So you can see there that there's good coverage of understanding and knowledge of research in the room, as well as experience, and less in the knowledge and understanding of social enterprise and social enterprise experience. So keep popping those responses in. It just helps us understand how we can read the room and cater for people who've joined. Okay, so thank you for that. And to get us kicked off, we're going to start with Queen's University, and we have Evie and Fiona. Both are anthropologists. Some have worked in a variety of areas and countries, ranging from Australia to Syria, UK, Turkey, Cyprus. Evie has a particular interest and research area between the connection between memory and history, and conflict and peace building, particularly in conflict-induced displacement and the politics of memory and loss. So, and then Fiona has a focus on Indigenous Australian politics and movements, refugee and mobility studies, and business anthropology. So we're going to hear from Evie and Fiona first, and towards the end, we'll have a Q&A session with all of the panelists. So if you've got a pen and paper there or something you can scratch and questions down, or things that you want to have a bit of a bigger talk or chat around or explanation, then just note them down, and we'll have a look at them at the end of the session. But like I said, during the session, please use the reactions emojis to go, yay, I really agree with that, or give some sort of response. So over to you, Evie and Fiona.
Thank you. I think Lynn is going to maybe pull up the slides for me. Lynn, I'll just maybe tell you when to move slides. Is that okay? So good morning, everyone.
I'm not really sure, Fiona. Can you see my screen? I'm trying.
Yeah, I can see you.
Yeah, because I think Lynn hasn't been able to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'm just going to.
Perfect.
So I'll do it. Is that okay, Lynn?
Yes. No, I wouldn't like.
Sorry, I might actually. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you everyone. My name is Fiona, and alongside my colleague Evie, we're going to just give you a little bit of background to the project based in Turkey, and show you some very nice images as well from the work that we've been doing. And just in terms of the background, in 2017 we were awarded a British Academy grant entitled Counting Our Losses: Social Entrepreneurship, Refugees and Urban Transformation in Turkey. And really the scope of this project was to examine Syrians' experiences of labour pathways in Istanbul in particular. And we had a very particular focus on social entrepreneurships, particularly refugee-led entrepreneurship. So yeah, so that's the sort of origins of the project, and we conducted that project in conjunction with a brilliant team over in Bilgi University. Next slide, please, Evie. So just in terms of a background, I mean, we don't have a lot of time to be giving, you know, a lot of background around the challenges that Syrians face in Turkey, but they do face huge challenges in terms of access to the labour market. They're often readily underemployed, indeed often exploited. What we've seen with the pandemic is a huge acceleration of all of these kinds of issues, and our research really aimed to understand the gender, ethnic and class elements of refugee labour markets, in terms of trying to think about longer scholarly impacts on one level, but also sort of more policy and practical insights as well. So it was a combination of things. The research, I suppose, was in collaboration and in dialogue with our research participants. But while we were doing the scholarly research, we did note quite a significant gap there in terms of their needs, very practical needs around training. And with the brilliant help of the sort of impact team in QUB, we did win some small impact grants that allowed us to kind of engage a little bit more with some of these organizations in ways which we will kind of highlight today. As anthropologists, we tend to work with a number of different cases in very in-depth or engaged ethnographic fashion. And one of the organizations that we began to work really closely with is a wonderful organization called Knitstanbul. So some of the images that you've just seen on the previous slides are of these women who are involved in this particular refugee or social enterprise, and the basis of which is obviously knitting and knitting baby goods. I suppose in terms of working with the notion of entrepreneurship or social entrepreneurship, there are obviously lots of definitions, as many of you know, a very broad range of, I suppose, ideas come under that term. But the particular definition that we engage with is the one up on the slide, by Austin et al., and they define social entrepreneurships as innovative, social value creating activity that can occur within or across the non-profit business and public sectors. And so in much of our own work, actually, we confined our sort of analysis and our research to this sort of more social activist end of the social entrepreneurship spectrum. Yeah. Next slide. So just a little bit of background to Istanbul itself. It was founded in 2014 by Malika Brown, who is a British writer and an expat. And she'd actually been living in Syria for a long time and then moved to Turkey. And she was there during, I suppose, the so-called refugee crisis, what we prefer to call the border crisis, when a sort of a lot of Syrians started to arrive in Istanbul. And she really, at that point, started to engage with the Syrian community coming to Istanbul. And she felt, I suppose, a need from a sort of an activist angle to sort of try and set up some kind of organization. And this idea of Istanbul was born, principally because she was engaging with a lot of women, and she came up with the idea that somehow knitting was a sort of a small scale business idea that they could implement readily, easily, and then sort of grow from that. And so this sort of idea of this crafting business was born. They have a brilliant website, actually. If you do have time, pop on their website, and a great Instagram page as well, where you can see some of the things that they produce. And it was primarily baby goods, and this has grown, I think, over the past number of years. That's just one image of this lovely little teddy bear that you can see. And I suppose what's also very interesting about Istanbul is they've attempted to keep their community of knitters. So as people move out of Istanbul onwards to France or Germany or beyond, whatever country it is, they've attempted to try and engage the women that work with them and sort of maintain the social enterprise in terms of those sort of more transnational connections. So I'll pass you over to Evie now. She'll give you a little bit more background.
Yeah, so precisely because of the issue Fiona was talking about, a common feature of attempting to establish refugee social enterprises is that many participants eventually leave. They move to other places, so it's very hard to sustain the group and sustain the enterprise. So in this particular case, after consultation and dialogue with the research participants, we designed a number of research and engagement activities pretty much to find out what their needs are and to build a collaborative marketplace. And what came out of this was that, you know, and this is an example of the engagement activities we did with them. But what came out of this was the need of a global marketplace, an online global marketplace that could keep people connected and it could keep the business going, really. So we help them in a number of ways to do that, to build this online platform. We applied further to our British Academy project. We applied, as Fiona said already, to the QUB Engagement Fund, and some extra funds from the ESRC as well. So we conducted a number of activities, including sourcing an IT platform developer. So we helped them find an IT developer who constructed the global marketplace for Istanbul. We also worked with them to trace Syrian participants, so women who had gone away and re-engaged through the global platform, so bring them back to the social enterprise and keeping them connected. Something also that we were planning as a really important feature of this global marketplace is also to offer training. So not just to sell products, but also to be used as a platform to offer training to newcomers as well. And finally, what we were also planning to do connected to that, which is something we're looking into developing, is to produce a training pack embedded in the platform for remote users wishing to remain in the program after relocation, but also newcomers. So in some ways, you know, in order to make the social enterprise sustainable, you know, we realized in conjunction with Istanbul that what people really want is contact, staying in touch, and keeping up with their skills, but also keeping up with their social networks. And that's what that global marketplace has been trying to do. We built this, you know, obviously for us, this was also part of our research project, and we're very interested in seeing how this project can become a blueprint for other refugee-led social enterprises and how they might develop in Turkey and beyond Turkey, and see how this sort of research can potentially enhance capacity building for other refugee-led social enterprises. We just want to say, while trying to finish this presentation, that through our research, we found out that some of these social enterprises, especially in Istanbul, and we have a quote here from one of the participants in the group who says, "Without Istanbul, I would just stay at home alone and do nothing. Now I have new friends and a way of making some money. We have all been through the same kinds of things, and we can talk to one another and think about our old and new lives." So we found out that for some participants, social enterprises do provide an alternative pathway into empowering and bettering livelihoods. But it's also quite important and crucial for us to approach this topic through a critical lens in order to better understand the doubleness of how social enterprises function, both at state and policy level, as well as individual and community level. So social enterprises, especially in the context of refugee rights, where, you know, function in a context where the broader narrative of the entrepreneurial refugee places a strong emphasis on productivity. And sometimes that means that individuals are just reduced to their labor in order to validate their worth and presence in a given host country. So we're quite aware of that. And Istanbul has the other side of it that is much more involved in refugee rights activism, and they produce some products that relate to that activism and advocacy for exhibitions, for public engagement and stuff like that. We're also quite aware of the fact that an overemphasis on the economic resilience of refugees can also be read as a state attempt at deferring the responsibility of addressing the protracted crisis situations of asylum seekers and refugees. So in some ways, sometimes social enterprises are used as an excuse by the state to say, oh, you know, I don't need to offer support, you're doing pretty well. And that's actually when social enterprises struggle as projects. And also sometimes social enterprises, you know, operate in a way that undermine the continued uncertainties and anxieties that asylum seekers and refugees face beyond the acquisition of a work permit. So just to finish up, what we found through our project was really interesting and empowering stories and data about how some social enterprises have worked for refugees, especially in Istanbul. But obviously, we're also wary of the other dynamics we've just outlined, and the understanding of the intersection of these dynamics has been quite crucial in our work. And we look forward very much to listening to your perspectives on this. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Fiona and Evie. That's brilliant. I'm just going to give people just literally a couple of seconds, about 10 seconds, 20 seconds. If you've got a pen and paper there, if there's anything that resonated with you, a question that you want to unpack, or an idea that was presented, whether it be about social enterprise or research methods or the research side of it, just jot it down so that you can come back to it at the end of the panel. And while you're doing that, Richard is up next. So I'll introduce Richard to you. He's the director of the Turnaround Project. Richard was special advisor to the Minister of Justice. So he had a lot of prior experience and knowledge around the Northern Ireland Prison Service and the justice system from a policy level and a political level, which took Richard into looking at transitional opportunities for supporting people leaving the justice system. He also does freelance consultancy work around strategic development, public policy, public affairs. And Richard's project is predominantly based out of Hydebank, and he is looking at ways that employment coaching and relational connections with the wider community for those leaving the justice system. So Richard, over to you.
Thanks, Janine. And thanks, Kevin and Lynn, for inviting me to participate today. Janine was involved in supporting Turnaround, supporting me in the very early days of our development, something like 4 years ago, when it was little more than an idea in paper. So it's great to catch up and share progress. So what I've been asked to do is give you an introduction to Turnaround. So I'll talk a little bit about how we've developed over the last 4 years, a little bit about our relationship with Queen's, and in particular the recent work that we've been engaged in through the ESRC Impact Acceleration Award. I have a few slides which I will use to introduce you to Turnaround, and hopefully you can see those now. If I can get back, yeah. So can you see the slides? Am I getting a thumbs up from somebody? Yeah, great. Yeah, Turnaround, we're a limited company. We've limited company with charitable status, developed over the last 4 years. Operational in the sense of providing services for about 2 years. And you can find a lot more about what we do on our very recently redeveloped website, theturnaroundproject.org. So I'm not going into too much detail today, but I can summarize the work in terms of a 1, 2, 3. So we've one vision, we've 2 goals, and a model comprised of 3 elements. So the one vision is of a community in which everyone has hope and opportunity. Our 2 goals are to help people who are serving sentences, whether in prison or in the community, to turn around their futures. And secondly, to turn around the wider community, encouraging and providing people with opportunities to engage with and support people on that journey. And the 3 elements to our model are firstly, transitional training and employment, offered before and after people complete their sentences. Secondly, a model of coaching that helps people identify and build on their strengths and plan for their future. And thirdly, developing shared supportive communities of people, some of whom have been through the justice system, some of whom haven't, but who volunteer together and support one another. Our transitional employment model has been developed in response to our own and other people's, including a lot of social science research that shows that the many barriers to employment faced by people as they complete their sentences. And for many people, conventional employment is hard to find, and even when opportunities are offered, they're generally in conventional settings, and people find them very difficult to sustain. So we work to build long-term relationships with people before and after they complete their sentences, and provide a more supportive working environment. We typically employ people for 2 or 3 days a week, allowing them time to adjust and deal with the many other demands and requirements that they face during that period. We pay a weekly wage to help people with budgeting. We make allowances for the challenges that we know people face as they enter the world of work, and fundamentally provide a safe space where people can overcome often high levels of anxiety and low levels of self-esteem that can prevent employment opportunities from either being taken up in the first place or sustained afterwards. We operate 2 enterprises. Outwork is our grounds maintenance enterprise, delivering commercial contracts for a range of clients, and Big Loot Bikes, which is a refurbished bike enterprise. We collect unwanted bikes in the community, refurbish them in a workshop at Hydebank College, and sell them at pop-up shops in the community. For our coaching, we employ a member of staff who works with each person to help them develop their plans. Those plans can be very short term, dealing with the next few weeks, or they can be longer term. And each one is personal, structured around the things that are important to each individual, and while we commit to supporting people in achieving those plans, we also encourage them to use their learning to support other people on the same journey. And then our ambition to develop shared supportive communities, not unlike what we've been hearing about with the Istanbul enterprise, recognises that moving away from the justice system isn't just an individual pursuit and about changes in individual behaviour and identity, but also relies on access to positive networks and a sense of belonging. So we work to develop community capital, as I say, engaging people who have and haven't been through the system, volunteering and social activities chosen by those people, helping to build a sense of agency to shape how they're perceived by themselves and by others, and to strengthen a sense that they've got something to offer. So that's a very quick introduction to what we do. In terms of our relationship with Queen's, we began to develop that a couple of years ago when the team in the graduate school approached us about an opportunity to engage with some of their students. We were still early stages of developing our model, and we saw an opportunity there to do some co-design work. So we brought a multidisciplinary group of Queen's graduate students to Hyde Bank College to work with some of the students there to explore and discuss elements of our model and our approach to coaching. That was a great project, fascinating experience for both groups of students, and entirely unexpectedly led to us setting up Big Loop Bikes as an enterprise and to an ongoing relationship with Queen's. So we run our pop-up shops on campus. We've involved 2 more groups of graduate students in design projects, and we're now engaged with Queen's and Ulster University in Belfast Met on a project to extend that enterprise into a community setting. And in turn, the team at the graduate school then introduced us to Kevin's team, and we learned about the ESRC Impact Fund, and they helped us to think through potential options. And ultimately, we decided to apply for an impact voucher, which is essentially a £5,000 voucher that we were able to use to employ Queen's academics to do some social research for us. Long before setting up Turnaround, I had been aware of the really world-class expertise that we have within both local universities in criminology and social sciences generally, and in particular the work of Shad Maruna on desistance theory, and I learned very heavily on that work in developing our model. We were determined from the outset that we were going to base our work on robust evidence. So I chatted with Shad on a number of occasions about the potential for him to become involved in some other way in the ongoing development of Turnaround. And the impact voucher offered us a way to move on from those kind of informal chats to a more formal engagement. So Shad introduced us to one of his colleagues, Colin Walsh, and working with them, we developed an application for an impact voucher and have just within the last week or so received the report from their work. As I've said, Turnaround is still in its infancy, and it takes time to build an organization whose model requires the development and scaling of enterprises. So we've engaged with very small numbers of people so far in terms of what we might call service users. And we've only just begun to see people move the whole way through our model, from initial engagement through transitional employment and coaching through to conventional employment. So it was too early for us at this stage to look to social scientists to evaluate kind of long-term outcomes. So instead, Colin and Shad proposed they undertake a formative evaluation, looking at the components and mechanisms of change that we use in our approach, and to help prepare us in the longer term for an outcome evaluation. So they explored the experiences of key stakeholders, both those involved in the delivery of our work, statutory and non-statutory partners with whom we engage, and of course, people who have been through our programme. They examined the impact of the way in which we seek to involve service users in the design of our model, and identified a number of actions that we could take as we continue to develop. So it was termed a proof of concept evaluation, which is an academically rigorous approach to examining a new method or an idea to demonstrate its feasibility. Not intended to provide us with an assessment of outcomes, but to give us an empirical basis upon which we could develop and grow. their findings, which we're still very much absorbing, are broadly in 3 parts. So they provided us with a very comprehensive review of academic evidence that relates to and supports the approach that we've taken. So we're now in a position to say, don't just take our word for it. Here's academic evidence from the horse's mouth, as it were. They've given us valuable insights into the experience of our stakeholders, most importantly, the people to whom we've provided transitional employment and other support. And thirdly, given us recommendations for further development. In terms of those recommendations, how we might widen recruitment of people into the model, how we might widen and deepen our engagement with the community and be more proactive in how we understand and respond to some of the issues that impede reintegration, and fundamentally in terms of our ongoing relationship with academia, how we can improve the way we measure our work. And that was identified by them as a significant gap. So it wasn't an all rosy evaluation by any means. When you see the phrase significant gap, you go back and read that paragraph again. So they outlined benefits and risks of introducing more structured measures of impact, and I think very importantly for us, the importance of agreeing measures through collaboration with service users and staff. So what they've given us is a fundamentally very practical, very useful piece of work upon which we hope to build, not only in terms of the recommendations, but also an ongoing relationship with social science towards a longer term outcome evaluation. And my hope from the perspective of local academia is that we will bring opportunities to build on existing literature by examining work that, as Shad has said, is happening in their own backyard. So I hope that gives an outline. Happy to take any questions at the end or be involved in the discussion, or indeed engage with people offline if people have questions they'd like to follow up.
Brilliant, thank you, Richard. Oh, I'm getting a bit of feedback. Just if people want to just take a moment, as we did before, 20, 30 seconds, just if anything struck you, write it down for the Q&A at the end. But someone did come up, has asked just a very practical question around, I think it's Elena, has said, how long are the participants taking part in the transitional employment program, Richard?
So that can vary, but our ideal is that we will engage with people for about 6 months before they complete their sentences, and for up to 6 months afterwards. But as I say, that has varied. So we've had some people involved in the program for a period and then drop back out and then come back in again. In fact, we're re-recruiting somebody tomorrow. Other people have joined us just a few weeks before completing their sentence and stayed on with us for longer than 6 months beyond. But our aim is to provide at least a 12-month program for people. And then to encourage people to stay on, as I say, and support other people. So even though they've moved on into conventional employment, that they'd still continue to engage with us in building that community of people who can support each other.
Brilliant, thank you, Richard. And also, having journeyed with Richard in the ups and downs of social enterprise and starting a social enterprise, if you've got questions around what that journey can look like, the blood, sweat and tears that goes into creating something at the point that Richard is actually engaged in, by all means also pop those sort of questions down and we'll have a look at that social entrepreneurial journey as well from a personal perspective. Particularly given that with our Mentimeter, most people on the call here seem to be much more, have indicated they're much more au fait with research and the research area of life and not as much with the social enterprise. So if we can unpack that a bit more for people as well, we're more than happy to. Okay, and moving on to Jennifer. Jennifer's another person who I have encountered along the social entrepreneur and for purpose business. I'm not sure which terminologies you prefer to use for Elemental, Jennifer, but along that journey and process, she has a passion for ending health inequalities, and with her co-founder and business partner, Leanne, they founded Elemental Software. They are champions of female-led tech for good, and that's the essence of their company that's based up in Derry, Londonderry. And she wants to spread the word about the impact and the difference that social prescribing can make to people's lives, wider communities, and the health and social care sector as a whole. And essentially, Elemental is about creating a social prescribing movement. It's moved way out of Derry, Londonderry, and has an impact now across the UK and even globally. So over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thanks. My little speaker here is playing up on me, so hopefully you're able to hear me okay throughout. Just give me a shout if anything happens to the sound. So yeah, thanks very much for inviting me to come along and speak today. Research and collaboration has played a massive role in Elemental's formation, development and growth. So I'm here today to talk about that and a little bit about what we do. So yeah, as you say, we're based here in Derry, Londonderry. There's a team of 30 working here now with us, and we also have people working across England as well. So from an idea that came about 7 years ago during the City of Culture year to something that provides work and employment and puts a bit of life back into the heart of the community. We're delighted to be able to say that we're a great example of genuinely wanting to make a difference in the community and then being able to create employment opportunities. And what we're all about is about connecting people, building communities and improving lives. So what do we do? So what we do is based all around social prescribing. What is social prescribing? Well, it's really just good community development. We all know that when someone's connected into their community and they have access to, in their own neighbourhoods, to mental health support, diet, nutrition support, debt advice, so things like exercise opportunities and walking clubs and maybe cook-it classes and meditation and yoga. If those types of services are available in someone's community, they're going to be healthier and happier. It's going to be even better if they're being able to be supported to engage in those types of services. Because when Leanne and I we were doing community development for 15 years each, and we knew that despite our best efforts and despite the efforts of all the different agencies and organizations and centers that were working, the people who needed the most support were still being left behind. It wasn't enough just to hand someone a leaflet or a flyer and say, you'd love that, you should attend that. So we knew that people needed more. At that time, we didn't realize that what that meant was social prescribing. It was a movement that was really starting to grow and develop. And it's based around the premise that you need a community navigator or a link worker or someone who you can sit with and talk about what matters to you, what's important to you, and the challenges that you face, and someone who can help you engage in all those different things that are available. So in 2013, there was no end of things that you could be involved in here in the city. So what we said was, let's try and help connect the whole thing up. And we called ourselves like the Match.com of health improvement. And we set about going out and asking GPs and community pharmacies and social workers and people in communities and providers of community services. And we asked them, and commissioners of services, what do you need to make that happen? So Leanne and I then built a prototype. We took it back into the community again to test it. And the feedback we got from that enabled us to build Elemental, this core platform that's been used all over the UK and Ireland at the moment. And we've gone beyond opening up referral routes and helping to create like a live and interactive database of services in different communities, because now we're able to demonstrate the impact on the patient, the person. So is their well-being improved? Is their anxiety levels reduced, for example? Are their social isolation levels improving? What's the impact on the community? So where are referrals coming from? What are they for? What are the reasons for referral? What's the capacity for organizations out there to receive those referrals and be able to support people? Where are the gaps? What are people looking for that maybe is not there? And how can we join everything up? And then most importantly, I suppose from a commissioning and a sustainability point of view, we're able to go and say, look, this is the impact that these community-based programs and services have on the health and social care system. So there's less GP appointments, less A&E appointments, waiting lists reduced and things, because we all know the community and voluntary sector are very much at the core and at the forefront of delivering services that really make a difference to people's lives. And Leanne and I wanted to be part of making sure that that was being recognised and rewarded accordingly. So some of the challenges that organisations face that we help with, so they want to open up these referral pathways from GPs and different other allied health professionals and maybe other organisations. They want to increase access to the programmes and services they provide. They're operating a lot of the times in terms of very paper-based or Excel spreadsheets, so it's very difficult to report and truly get an impact or an outcome in terms of what difference it's making. They need to demonstrate the impact, and they want to be able to demonstrate it at a cohort level or an individual level, and they really want to provide a clear picture for their funders. So this is an example in Knowsley of a model that Elemental supports. So we always say people first, technology second. So we are in the background of this. So our system helps referrals to be made from GP systems, from crisis support, from other third sector organisations. It helps people to make self-referrals as well. So during COVID, that's been massive because people couldn't get to the GP to get a social prescription, so they were able to self-refer themselves into Care Merseyside, this charity. So Care Merseyside has adopted Elemental and they use it as their core system. They're able to work through their different caseloads, understand what people are looking for. They have all their programs and services on Elemental, and then they'll reach out to other partners and say, look, you know, our people are looking for an art classes or anyone out that could come in and deliver a 6-week program for art in the community. So, and then they can do all the different reports to be able to show the impact and the uptake of everything. So thanks to Elemental, Care Merseyside are connected with 11 GP practices. They were able to get extra volunteers and staff on board during COVID. We have an online learning academy, so they were able to go in and do their modules and be able to use Elemental straight away. So they had a full team of people who were using digital to be able to process everything and reach as many people as possible. They created a real-time and interactive database of services. They had to switch off all their face-to-face programs and services and create a non-face-to-face, so it was mutual aid support, food bank support, phone a friend was a type of intervention. So this organisation was still able to function during COVID, and demand for their services was more than ever, and they were able to demonstrate the impact of that to their customers. They can also attract many partners as well in terms of what they're able to do. And then they were able to show different pots of funding coming in from National Lottery and Comic Relief and be able to report specifically to them. So Elemental's all in the background, but what does this actually all mean? So here's a little quick example. So a gentleman in Knowsley lost 2 of his dogs, and he was really, really sad about it. And then obviously he was really isolated because he was out walking with them and things. He was partnered up with Paulo, one of the local volunteers. Paulo is actually able to help him fill out the application for the Dogs Trust, and he was able to secure, he was able to get a new dog. So this was helping to get him out and about and get him, you know, a bit of companionship as well. So that's how it transpires on the ground, but in the background, you've got Elemental kind of power and everything. So who uses Elemental? We work with community voluntary sector organisations. We work with NHS Foundation trusts and clinical commissioning groups and GP practices. We also are used by housing associations as well, because they're able to better support their tenants and their residents. Local authorities also use Elemental as well. And I suppose most relevantly, based on what Richard was talking about, prison services are also using Elemental. They are developing the social prescribing model of care within the prison. So Hydebank is an example who, again, leading the way, and they said, look, we want to be able to have a better understanding of the different things that are available within Hydebank. We want to better support our students to help engage in these programs and services. We want to get a real understanding of what they like and what they've found beneficial. So when it's time for release, we're able to say, well, look, you really enjoyed being a part of and doing the gardening and maybe being part of the art class. Let's see if we can find you something beyond the gate that's similar to that, so that you can get you can be involved in that as well. So we're really, really excited about the future. We're able to track and measure so many different things, and we've got over 56,000 people now that have been benefiting from social prescribing and community and voluntary sector organisations as a result. So Leanne and I basically just came up with this idea, as I say, 7 years ago. What was really, really important and relevant to today is that we pitched our idea at an event called the TMed Health Challenge in 2013. Now, that pitch didn't go very well, so we didn't win, but Professor Maurice Mulvena, computer science in Ulster University, he actually won the prize that night. And he approached us afterwards and he said, your idea is actually better than mine. I'm going to give you the £500 that I've won to help you get started. So this was him recognizing what we were doing. Many people didn't understand and hadn't a clue, but he said, look, there you go. So £500 got us started. We did a bit of work with him where one of his students helped build a very early stage prototype for us to enable us to go into the community and test it all out. So this is very early research collaboration. We applied for a couple of innovation vouchers. So we worked with Justin McGee and his team in Ulster University as well. And we got some great work there. We got some collateral and some research. And then we worked with Karen Kirby to evaluate the pilot that we did in the Craigan community. So again, this gave us validated what we were doing. It gave us an academic partner as well. And it really got us started. Moving on, we've been able to since then go on and influence policy and practice. So each person that you see in these photographs is me nattering on and really going on about social prescribing, digital, empowering communities, the role of the community and voluntary sector. So you can see Matt Hancock getting it there. He didn't get a word in edgeways. Sadiq Khan, he actually asked us to help him with his vision for social prescribing for London, and that was amazing to win that tender. Prince Charles is a big fan of social prescribing as well, so anytime I get to see him, we always catch up on how things are going. He's really interested in what's happening here in Northern Ireland. And then there's Leanne and chatting to the First Minister and Deputy First Minister many years ago as well about what we're doing. We've even taken the message abroad to Dubai. So we got in with the Dubai Health Authority. We showed them what digital social prescribing could do. They ended up designing a program around happiness prescribing, and we got social prescribing written into their program for government for their health strategy, which was a great achievement. You can see these guys looking at me thinking, who's this crazy woman from Northern Ireland and what's she talking about? But it was great to get a chance to really make a difference around type 2 diabetes in Dubai. And finally, so we haven't stopped innovating and collaborating. We're working with the University of Salford around a KTP program around the data that's coming from Elemental and how we can overlay that to data around criminal justice, GP data, social care data to show the difference it's making. We've been working with Queen's University in the past around suicide bereavement and digital social prescribing with Karen Galway's team. University of London, again, the economic benefits of social prescribing. University of South Wales around a measurement tool that they're developing. University of Ulster, we're just about to put an application in for a Health Foundation bid tomorrow with them around diabetes. University of Salford, these are about pop-up men's sheds. So we're doing a piece with them. And then finally, we were recognised there as winners of the Cambridge Social Innovation Prize just last month there, which was a great achievement for us. So lots of great opportunities. We'd love to hear from anybody who is looking for a digital partner, or if you're doing a piece of research and you want to see, you know, if there's some way of maybe potentially working together. But yeah, or even if you want to see a demo of the system, I've put some details on there and you can get in contact with me. So thank you, everybody. Hopefully I have enlightened you a little bit in terms of the impact of social prescribing and the role that digital can play, but also shone a light on how important collaboration and research, and specifically the universities here in Northern Ireland, have had in Elemental success.
Thanks, Jennifer. That's brilliant. And it's really great to see that grow from success to success. So once again, if there's something that struck a chord with you, something you want to know a bit more about it, just take a moment now to write it down, and we'll move over as we're doing that to Martin and Kieran. So both Martin and Kieran are from Queen's as well, and Martin's a senior lecturer at Queen's Management School, as well as a chartered accountant. He's had various roles in academia and management development over the past 25 years. But his speciality in terms of research interest is accounting and performance reporting of social organisations and sustainability reporting. Kieran is also a professor at Queen's in accounting and subject lead for accounting in Queen's Management School. He's also a fellow of Chartered Accountants Ireland, and his research interest is the field of public services, particularly the financial and performance measurement aspects of charities, social enterprises, and public sectors. So over to Kieran and Martin.
Hi, everybody. Thanks very much. And thanks to Kevin and Lynn for organising this, and obviously Janine, you for facilitating the session. Much appreciated. As you say, myself and Kieran are based in the management school, and we're based in the accounting group. But we're also members of the Centre for Not-for-Profit and Public Sector Research. So we're absolutely committed to working with practitioners, policymakers, to look engage in evidence-based research, and I think part of what we're talking about today is about making a difference, and that's what we try to do, and that's what we try to do with our students. And we also have a module, just again fitting with the theme of today. We have an undergraduate module which for our final year undergrad students, which is on not-for-profit and public sector issues, and that is several aspects of that module are about social enterprise and social entrepreneurship, and showing students that it's not just about the corporate world or the big business, and that's critical, and that's probably where myself and Kieran, in terms of our own research, are coming from. We sort of engage in research in the not-for-profit SEO type sector. Okay, in the Northern Ireland context, I mean, and I've always thought this for many years, you know, it's the, I think social enterprise is absolutely fascinating alternative to the traditional shareholder value model that we have. It goes to places where the public sector and the private sector have been afraid to go or don't want to go, and I think if there's one thing we've learned about this current pandemic is together we are stronger, and I think that has come across even some of the case studies we've heard today and some of the other speakers. And I really have a passion that the social enterprise model, and this is me coming from an accountant who worked in some of the big accountancy firms and have worked in corporate organizations, but I really do think social enterprise brings people together, and I think that's very important for our students as well to know that. I also think it reminds us we can innovation, and that's already come up with Istanbul, but social enterprises can provide innovative solutions, not just to small problems, to big problems. So I think with the grand challenges that we've got, the climate change debate, the poverty and equality debates, I think, again, this model is going to be critical in a post-COVID economy. So I think, again, this event is timely. But one of the issues, I think, and the difficulties that some social enterprises will have is this between balancing the financial and social sustainability. So it's about the social, but you need money to do what you're going to do. Okay? And we often talk about the not-for-profit sector. Well, money is not bad, not for profit. You can make a surplus, but it's what you do with that surplus, and that's the whole idea of social enterprise, is to put that then into, but there is this balancing act between the financial and social sustainability, but it's social issues that the social enterprises address, and therefore the argument would be that that's what they want to get out there in terms of, look, we do make a difference, here is the difference we make, but that involves, unfortunately, in some cases, measuring. Okay, so how do we then, as social enterprises, measure our performance? How do we communicate that we are doing we're meeting these social objectives? How do we actually it's easy to measure financial performance. It is much more difficult, much more complicated to measure social and environmental performance. And unfortunately, sometimes when one is actually trying to say, look, this is the difference we're making, others will say, well, how do you do it? Prove it to me. Show me something that does. And so balancing that financial and social sustainability while still being focused on the mission is a challenge, which can be done. Okay, I'll move over to Kieran just to talk a little bit about what that idea of performance. Kieran?
Okay, thanks, Martin, and good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, just following up with what Martin was saying, and I suppose first thing that we have to do is apologise, because it's very easy for us to, if you like, sit on the sidelines and pontificate about how our organisation should measure performance whenever we don't actually have to do it in practice. So I suppose I have to start with that. And Martin and I would also accept that many organisations, if not most, this whole idea of measuring performance and impact, it's already happening, at least internally. And I suppose the focus we have is it now getting to the stage where organisations need to start considering, should we be reporting that externally? And if so, how do we go about that? So with that in mind, I mean, I think we'll all agree that the strength of the social enterprise sector comes from the value that society places on the social capital that it generates. And a key argument that Martin and I would make, particularly to students whenever we're trying to convince them of the importance of social enterprise, would be that good accountability, whatever form that takes, supports the building of trust. And the trust is essential if the social enterprise sector is to continue and remain strong and healthy. However, the converse of that is also true, that if poor accountability, it's going to damage trust, and damaged trust will therefore weaken the social enterprise sector. So the bottom line is that good accountability, and again, it can take many different forms, but good accountability is vital. I suppose our question then is, what form should that take? And while we would accept that financial accountability in terms of traditional financial statements is very important, I think Martin and I would both argue that performance accountability is paramount in order to, if you like, securing the trust of individuals and the strength of the sector. You could move on there, Mark, this next one. Okay, so if we accept that there's considerable trust in social enterprise organisations, you could argue that that's been generated without any real evidence, certainly publicly available evidence, of the positive role that SEOs play. Very often it's just taken for granted. So therefore, perhaps you can imagine how powerful or compelling, the case for social enterprise would be if it was possible to externally show the impact that SEOs are making. And indeed, you could argue that for those that work out how to measure their impact and also communicate it, therefore you can imagine the impact that will have on their success and health and ability to attract funding. However, as I said at the start, performance measurement, impact reporting, it's rarely easy or straightforward. And certainly I think it's something that has to be done internally before you would even think about trying to do it externally. Just next one there, Martin. So I suppose what an approach or an argument that Martin and I would make would be, okay, so from a social enterprise perspective, you could argue that you can view performance in terms of a production process, and I appreciate that does simplify it a bit, but with performance being judged really in terms of efficiency and effectiveness. So perhaps what you could do is either at an organizational level or at a program level, start off with the aims and objectives, and then what you would consider doing internally and then hopefully externally, be it through your annual report or on your website, is start to look at, okay, for that particular program or as an organization, what inputs do we put into it? And those inputs could be monetary, for example, the expenditure we incur. They could be non-monetary, the number of staff or the number of volunteers, or could even be quality, for example, the number of specialized staff or qualified staff that we have. We then enter into some sort of process or range of activities that the organization carries out. For example, the number of projects funded, the number of visits that we make to assist people, leading to outputs. And those outputs will be the actual goods and services produced. And then you can start to consider, okay, let's report. And I know there's a lot of debate about, is there a difference between outcomes, results, and impacts? But and again, they can be monetary. So for example, the income from the services that we generate, it could be non-monetary. Can we measure the level of awareness of the people that have been educated as a result of what we do? Or even, you know, is it possible to measure customer satisfaction? If we're not too sure if customer is the right word, or user satisfaction. And very often that's done through the use of personal stories. And then that leads us into, I suppose, trying to measure efficiency and effectiveness, with efficiency being the relationship between our inputs and our outputs. And again, that could be on a monetary basis, you know, a cost per person assisted, or even a non-monetary basis. For example, you know, the number of cases handled per employee, or the number of students taught per teacher, if we take our own circumstances here. And then we try to look at effectiveness also, which is the relationship between our outputs and our objectives. And again, we would argue that that information can be monetary. So for example, financial recovery versus target, it might be non-monetary. The number of people assisted versus a target, or it could even be quality related. For example, the number of inquiries responded to within a certain number of days. So perhaps then we should consider looking at this information either on an organizational basis or on a program basis, and look at how we might report that. And I'll hand you back to Martin now to talk about some research that we carried out.
Yeah, thanks, Kieran. Yeah, I'm just going to sort of briefly go over this. But yeah, we looked at 129 social enterprise organizations across the UK, and we were looking at their annual reporting process. And what we found was that they weren't providing the information on performance. They weren't providing the efficiency and effectiveness. They were concentrating on their sort of the legal information. So there was stuff on aims and objectives and governance, but nothing much in terms of performance information, stakeholder dialogue, or efficiency and effectiveness information. So in terms of their annual report. So balancing their business and social objectives, I mean, our argument that they need, you need this, and what Kieran was saying there as well, we need to pay attention to the various mediums by which this information on aims and objectives can be measured and communicated. So there are mediums to do that. I mean, Twitter and other social media platforms, which organizations do, but it's trying to get a way of measuring this wonderful impact, or capturing some of this impact, as opposed to relying on "we do good things, don't we?" If you're trying to communicate that to funders, or to get you're in competition to get money to keep doing what you're doing. So that we've included there the link to the article, but that's the general gist. There's a cost of that. If you're a small social enterprise, I mean, there's a money cost to that. And this is why I think collaboration is so important, to collaborate. And one of the speakers that was talking about collaborating, or both speakers who were talking about the social enterprises they were running, were both talking about collaborating with academics and others. So again, there's a cost to this, so that has to be taken into account. That could be a reason why they're not providing that information. And there's also a sort of capacity constraint within the sector in terms of size, etc. You know, big, large corporate organizations have lots of money to throw at social sustainability, environmental sustainability, and put up a good reports and to say this is what we do in terms of sustainability, but they've got the money to throw at that. So that's an important factor. So it's that balancing act that I think is important between financial viability and social impact. And I think that's probably our message. I think, Kieran, you just want to quickly say something on the last slide.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Martin. Just linking back to what Martin was saying, and I'll not show them, but the links are there. It was really, rather than thinking of terms of what are the different ways you can measure your impact, we just included some examples, and I appreciate they are of charities per se, but there's a link there about how Barnardo's in Scotland every month release information on Twitter. Dementia UK took their rather staid, boring, sort of traditional annual report and financial statements, and actually turned it into a very short 2 to 3 minute video, which is very informative. And the last one, which I particularly like, and maybe you can link on it again, people in their own time, WaterAid, in order to show the impact of bringing water to a village for the first time. The way they demonstrated impact was they actually produced a video of a woman who's probably about at least 90 years of age dancing as the water is first turned on in the village. And it was just a very nice, arguably humorous way of demonstrating impact. So it doesn't always have to be numbers.
Yeah, and just sort of our last sort of comment on that overall is, I noticed that Fiona and Evie talked about this idea of community of practice. Well, that's exactly what we've got here today. So thank you, because I think it's a fantastic expression. That's what it is about, with students, with practitioners, with policymakers, with academics. That's what we're about. So thank you.
Thanks, Kieran and Martin. That's brilliant. There's so much to unpack in that. So I've just posted into the chat if people want to go there, and any of the questions or comments or things that you want unpacked a bit more, just if you want to start popping into the chat there. So Kira is interested in hearing about the steps Evie and Fiona took and their experience of continuing on the Nitstembul community of practice remotely. What did this engagement look like? Over to Evie and Fiona.
Hi. I'm not sure. I completely understand the question. Kira, do you mean during the course of the pandemic? Because actually during the research itself, we went to Istanbul and we engaged in a very direct way, and the training part of anthropology means we're ethnographers, and ethnography means really being there and engaging in that particular way. But certainly across the since the lockdown in Istanbul, there was an extremely severe lockdown, and our research participants, a lot of the women working in Istanbul, were profoundly impacted by what happened in Istanbul in terms of being able to continue the business, and that's something that we're hoping to sort of look at and engage with a little bit more. So unfortunately, that's sort of still continuing. So in terms of some of the work we have done has been sort of virtual in terms of conducting interviews online, but very much sort of going to Istanbul, being there and engaging in that sort of direct way. We were present as well for any of the trainings that we were able to fund, and we were able to kind of write about that as well. So I suppose the objective there was to do both, was to sort of have that sort of real world impact, but also the sort of scholarly sort of thinking and reflection it was also very important. So kind of putting those two things in dialogue. So being and engaging in our field sites are really critical to our practice as anthropologists. So I hope that answers the question.
Kira, would you like to unmute and unvideo if you want to ask further or take a context further?
Hey, yeah, no, it was more, I think you'd mentioned sort of engaging the participants in a community of practice sort of beyond the study, that they would maintain their contacts and their networks. So it was more how you went about doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think our role in terms of the project, the impact aspect of the project was very much sort of seeking the funding, putting that in place, but working in a collaborative way with them, so that the women themselves can then continue the practice beyond us. And even the founder, Malika herself, I suppose part of her intention with the organization was eventually to pass it over to the women themselves, so that they could continue it in that sort of refugee-led way. So so that was very much part of the scope. So it was setting things up and creating the space for the collaboration and the training to happen. Documenting that was very much, as I said, part of our approach and writing about it, but ensuring that was going to continue through the different sort of elements that we put put in place, and it has, it had up until the pandemic has, as I said, quite severely impacted in lots of ways. Massive inflation in Istanbul, so the cost of all of the sort of wool and things that they need to run the business have increased drastically. Sort of issues around delivery and getting the things that they produce to people. They have very much an international market, so all of that has been very much impacted. But sort of beyond that, sort of setting up the things so that they would exist beyond us was sort of key and critical. And I think it's worked. But it's something that we're going to be coming back to, because I think we're very much interested in looking really now at the impact of the pandemic on something like a refugee social enterprise, in terms of, I suppose there's such issues around the sustainability and the ability to scale for these organizations, and I think the pandemic has really exposed some of the issues, so I suppose, at play in terms of the setup of something like Istanbul.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer the question for you, Kira?
Yeah, it does. I think I'm wondering, was that engagement long term maintained more in person rather than digitally, I suppose?
Yeah. I mean, again, I suppose back to being anthropologists, it's very much about sort of in-person engagement. We do work very closely with Bilgi University and a team of researchers there, so that they're physically there, obviously, all the time. We can only go back and forth. Our last trip was in February, but we have sustained that. But in both ways as well. I mean, we do speak to our participants, obviously, in an online capacity, and have kept in touch with a number of them across the sort of lockdown period. But that's sort of closing it. Sorry, Evie, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, sorry, if I can just say quickly. I mean, the global marketplace was really designed to give the products, expose the products to a broader market, and that was quite impacted by the pandemic, because the people themselves don't have the resources. Again, we are not equally affected by the pandemic. So people had even more limited access to technology and to materials, as Fiona said. So we realized that they couldn't really sustain that global marketplace. And what you're asking, Kira, is that global marketplace wasn't there long enough, and again, because it was impacted by the pandemic, to sustain these social relations and networks enough, or to create new ones so they can be sustained. So again, as Fiona said, we're just very, very interested in looking at the impact of the current situation on social enterprises like that. They rely very much on social relations, connectivity networks, especially because they are very mobile and immobile at the same time.
Yeah, okay, no, that's really interesting, thank you.
Thanks, Fiona and Evie. I'm going to direct a question to Jennifer and Richard, but it's on the back of what Kieran and Martin were talking about, because as they acknowledged, it's one thing to talk about performance and impact measurement. It's another thing to actually be on the ground and actually attempting to do that in the practical sense. And that the key between balancing the measurement and the data and how you communicate it. And so my experience is that social enterprises, they can accumulate a lot of data because there's a lot of data coming in. How do you guys actually then really sift through that and find the nuggets, the things that are actually crucial to measure, and then communicate it in a way that has to be able to be understood by really diverse audiences, including your beneficiaries. So from funders to policymakers to beneficiaries to community organizations, there's so many different ways that impact measurement then has to be communicated out. So Jennifer, I'll go to you first and then to you, Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Janine. So I think what we say to people, first of all, is, what is within your gift? Sometimes commissioners ask for data that's just impossible for you as an organization to obtain. So what we try and do is kind of empower them a little bit to say, well, look, this is what we provide, this is the data we collect. If you want that data to be linked with, you know, the difference it's making to social care and demand on social care, you know, they have to support you to be able to link that data, because you know yourself, you're designing the program. You know, when you run a program, you're designing it, you're applying for funding, you're recruiting participants, you're helping them to engage, then you have to do the evaluation and the report, and then you have to start applying for more funding again. So it has to be, you know, people are a lot's expected of people. So we also speak to commissioners as well and say, why are you asking for that? So, you know, if someone takes a license for elemental, we say, well, there are a lot of KPIs, you know, what are you doing with that information? So we try and kind of educate them as well to say, well, do you really need to know that? You know, is that, and a lot of the time people say, yeah, we just end up, it sits in a file and we don't even use that. So it's a careful kind of balance. We've simplified the way the data comes through in terms of reports and charts. So people can download that and pop it into their board meeting updates. They can also report at real time as well. So we've made that really simple because we've come from a very simple place in our heads in terms of this doesn't have to be complicated. You know, we just need to look at, you know, what's the demand for the service, what's people think of the service, what's the difference as a result. So a lot of the time is us kind of developing and listening to people about what they want their reports to look like. Pushing back a little bit to commissioners and others, and then making it, you know, translating that into something that is actually meaningful and that's going to help them secure more funding as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jennifer. Richard?
Yeah, small organizations starting out, this is inevitably one of those things that you're in real danger of putting on a to-do list and never getting to do. And you don't have kind of evaluation and impact teams there in an office somewhere working in this on an ongoing basis. So I guess the challenge for us is how do we build in the kind of recording of inputs and outcomes into our kind of everyday activities. And that's something that we're hoping to continue to talk to colleagues at Queen's about. You know, you with meager resources, you do find yourself prioritizing, and I think in terms of what Martin and Kieran were saying about organizations just doing the legal reporting bit, that's the bit that you absolutely have to do. That's the bit that your trustees lie awake at night worrying about, so it inevitably perhaps gets prioritized. We are trying to avoid finding ourselves in a position 10 years, 15 years down the line where we have to go back through paper files and try and work out how many people we've worked with and how many volunteer hours we've engaged and so on and so on. Yeah, if there's anybody in the call, whether it's Kevin or Kieran or anybody else who'd be interested in having a conversation with us around how we do this, get this right from early days rather than have to do things retrospectively, I'd be very keen to hear about that. And I guess the other thing that we're very wary of is over claiming. So if every organization that's working in the justice sector had the impact that they claim, we wouldn't have an issue of reoffending. Maybe it's an unhealthy degree of modesty, but we are very wary of getting ourselves in a position where we say we have prevented X number of people from reoffending, or we've saved the public system Y millions of pounds as a result of our work. But finding credible, authentic outcomes that we can stand over, we'd love to work with colleagues around that.
Thanks, Richard. So over to you, Martin and Kieran, just for two questions. One, Deborah has put a question into the chat panel around the fact that she's starting up and looking at setting up a social enterprise. And then on the back of Richard and Jennifer's conversation there, how do you go about taking the world of academia and I guess the processes and methodologies of research and marrying it in a way that actually, in that collaborative way into the social entrepreneurship ecosystem with people like Richard or Jennifer or others so that it's accessible. Because not everyone is coming from that kind of academic research background. So how do you go about marrying that in a way that is a win-win for everyone involved? And also Deborah's question there that's in the chat. So over to Kieran and Martin, you can tag team.
Yeah, I mean, part of that, I mean, it would be that we invite social enterprises in to talk to our students, etc. So we would be talking to them about things like social return on investment, or these models that are available. So that, and part of what we're doing now today, but not in enough. We probably need to be doing more of that. In terms of talking to people about what we can offer, and Richard has obviously put a hand up there for some help there. So we should be able to do something on that. Kieran, any thoughts to add to mine?
No, I mean, I think if we can bring anything, I suppose it's because we have the time to do the research and look at, if you like, what the theory says you should do. And we're very fortunate we have that time. Arguably, we don't have proper day jobs, but it's a whole different debate. And we hope then that we can bring that knowledge to people in practice, and basically then try and apply or make something workable that is presented very often in an academic way. So we need to engage, Martin and I would need to engage therefore more with people in practice, so that we can try and strike a balance between, you know, this is what the theory says you should do, for people to say, yes, but these are the practical consequences, or these are the ways that that it can be done. And I think Martin and I would also be keen to look beyond traditional reporting in terms of, you know, the annual report, and look at other ways that that information can be made available to different stakeholders.
Can I just say something, Janine?
Let's go, absolutely, Evie.
Following up on what Kieran was saying here. Obviously, sometimes there are some tensions there. So we mentioned a little bit in our presentation about the tension between being critical, but also not undermining what people are trying to do. At the same time, what we can offer and what we found quite important in trying to focus on is what Kieran was saying. Normally, these social enterprises have to justify themselves through metrics and different type of like impact measuring, whereas as anthropologists, what we've been able to do in this case is to provide more qualitative data on the efficiency of the social enterprise, or what is important. So you know, social enterprise might not be scaling up, but it might be very important because it offers refugees social networks. So that's something you can't really measure if you just look at the finances or like official reports, or even sometimes what gets attention in policy reports. And that's where we found our contribution in offering sort of the qualitative measuring and impact measuring that can offer alternative perspectives to what comes up in policy, for instance.
Thanks, Evie. And just before I hand over to Kevin, just so we can answer Deborah's question as well, in one sentence, she's wanting tips from each of you as a PH student starting to set up and start up a social enterprise. What would be your one comment, tip, highlight that you would give her? So I'll start with you, Fiona, from your experience. Oh, you go, Evie.
Oh, that's a very hard thing, and I haven't started it up myself really, but you know, for me as an anthropologist as well, for me the crucial thing here is the social. You know, that's a difference in terms of the corporate world. So you know, important social relationships, investing in that, and kind of learning from each other. So I think you have to have, you know, to pay attention on how you build on the social, what it means for your enterprise, what you do with it, and how you can build on it.
Jennifer?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I would say if you could find some ambassadors for what you're doing. So whatever the challenges that you're helping to tackle, if there's somebody in that space who's very well known, who could maybe champion what you do or mention a bit about what you do, it really gives you, it makes you feel like someone else is listening to you, and it's like a little bit of endorsement, and they talk about you, and it just gives you a bit of momentum and a bit of push to go forward, because then you know you're on the right tracks and you're making a difference. So if you
Brilliant.
add that.
Thanks, Jennifer. Martin?
Get your mission down on, which I probably have already, get your mission down on paper, go for it, believe, it'll happen.
Kieran?
Yeah, I feel very guilty given that I've never done it, but I suppose would be to walk first rather than run, and be realistic and don't try and save the world. But the last point that was made there by Jennifer, I think is really important. I think you need to have somebody with a voice that can shout louder than you can to get that message out there.
Thanks, Kieran. Richard?
2 suggestions. One is don't do it on your own. Get good people around you. Doesn't need to be lots of good people, but at least a couple of people to go on that journey with you. And secondly, there are great organizations out there that exist to help people do exactly what you're planning to do, Deborah. I see Nuala Smith's on the call here, so there's an organization called Unlimited. I'll paste their web address in the chat, and oh, there's Nuala's already pasted it. We've had huge support from Nuala and from the wider Unlimited community on a steady basis over the last few years, without which we wouldn't have got to where we've got. So there is help available.
Okay, and I'm not sure if Fiona's back yet, so Fiona?
Sorry, I was just having difficulties with my connection there.
Okay.
Apologies. No, I mean, I've never actually set up a social enterprise. Obviously, it's something we're studying and engaging with in that capacity. So I don't have any practical advice to offer, but I suppose just to reiterate what everyone has said, and I suppose from what we've seen from the research we've done in terms of, connecting to those sort of social networks, and having that sort of strong voice, and so on as well, in terms of building that story around your social enterprise. I think actually the Nitstanbul example is a wonderful example to look at in that respect, because they do that in a very strong way, that sort of story building, and in terms of the way they evoke, I suppose, the reason why they're there and their motivation, but also in terms of that awareness raising that they do very well about the experiences of refugees in Turkey, and the experiences of people who've been displaced because of conflict. So yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you, Fiona. So I guess for me, if I was to put a synopsis on all of that from you, I would say, Deborah, connectivity is really, really important. So connection, whether it's with the community that you're wanting to work in and with and alongside, academia in terms of their support and the way they can bring a dimension to that for you, other people who are champions and there to give you greater voice and greater storytelling impact, and connectivity with the people themselves who you're wanting to work alongside, so that their voice is what is actually being elevated and heard, and you're building something from their lived experience, and that social connectivity that Evie talked about as well with the community themselves. So over to you, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Janine. Just to add to that, Deborah, before we conclude, is to, and you may be doing this already, but make use of the facilities and the support that's in the university for, basic startups, any kind of startups. Again, through the graduate school, there's a number of innovation programs, and there's a social innovation program that they're running that you may be aware of. And also then keep in contact with me, because through my contacts in the Research and Enterprise Directorate, there are a number of supports for commercial development opportunities. And there is a growing movement to recognize that kind of social science-based activity is as much a credible kind of possibility for a startup as engineering and medicine, etc. So drop me an email if you want, and we can have a chat, and I can explain to you some of the programs that are coming up that might be useful both now but also with an eye to the future, to see where you go from there. But listen, to conclude, Janine, thank you very much for a great job in facilitating, and thank you to all of our speakers for sharing their expertise and their knowledge with everybody, and to our participants for chiming in and for asking questions and for staying with us. For this is the first event that we've done of these, and you know, I think it's gone really well, and it's great to see the interest that's been in it. And again, just to reiterate, thanks Lynn for all the support in setting this up. And again, listen, we'll be in touch. There'll be a link to the video of today and sharing the slides as well, so you can go back and check on things that maybe you've missed, and we'll be able to share it widely as well. But just to say again, thank you to everybody. We have run over slightly, so it's lunchtime, so go and have your lunch, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thanks, yeah.
Thank you.